Welcome to Midland Money Mindset, your weekly dose of inspiration and insights to ensure you enjoy each step of your journey. Whether you're saving for the future, planning your next big adventure, or simply looking to add more joy to your life, you've come to the right place. Now, let's dive in.
Well, I am really excited today to have Matt Dumouchelle on the show. As all our listeners know, I love talking about money. I like talking about investments, entrepreneurs, and hockey. So what can be better than that? And Matt is a contributor to the Coaches site, and he is best known for his series, The Hockey Factories. Welcome to the show, Matt. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me. I was looking forward to connecting with you. We've chatted a few times online. It's great to put a face to the name and officially introduce myself. So thanks again for having me.
My pleasure. And the Hockey Factories was a great series. I enjoyed it thoroughly, and we'll continue to do it if you add on to it. Before we jump into what you're doing today with the Coaches site and the series Hockey Factories, and talk about hockey today, can you give our listeners a little bit of a sense of who you are, where you came from, and what brought you to that point?
Yeah, for sure. It's a dangerous first question. My background is media and radio. So if you want to give me 2 minutes or 2 hours to talk about myself, I can do both of those pretty easily. No, best thing about me, I'm the dad of a 9-year-old Evelyn. My son is 6, turning 7. His name's Crosley. I've got a beautiful girlfriend named Christine, a stepdaughter named Madison, who's 10. So I have no problem finding things to do and carpooling people around. But my background's media. So I went to Humber College in Toronto and took a radio broadcasting course there and worked in radio for about 10 years with the intention of sports always being the goal. So I've always been a sports fan. Had the opportunity to play when I was a kid. I played baseball, but at no serious level or anything like that. So when I was working at the radio stations, I got to be involved with some hockey teams and doing some play-by-play stuff and things like that. Unfortunately, I was let go in about 2012 or so. So at that point, for me, again, hockey's always been in the bloodstream, or sports in general. So my intention at that point, instead of being behind the mic describing the game, was to get involved in the game on the front office side of things. So I worked for a pro baseball team that was based out of London, Ontario for a year. I worked with a pro basketball team that was in Windsor and won 2 championships with them. And then I got into more of the hockey front office and assistant general manager with a couple of junior teams and assistant GM with the Leamington Flyers of the Ontario Junior Hockey League now. So I'm 5 years into that. We won a Sutherland Cup championship a couple of years ago. So it's been awesome. It's been a great ride and certainly, as I said, no shortage of things to do. That's for sure. So
amazing.
It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's an amazing, history, and definitely, see that common thread in terms of being involved with sports really, along the way. Now, how did you end up, at what point and how did you end up working with the Coaches site and become a host on their podcast? I mean, we had Aaron Wilbur, the founder of the Coaches site, on episode 71 of our show. Okay. So he's a friend of the show, and I just saw him this past winter. We were able to meet up while my younger son was at a tournament in Calgary, so we finally met face to face, which was awesome. So, cool. How did you end up coming to work with them and then hosting, their podcast?
Yeah, Aaron is fantastic, and I've learned so much from him and his team getting to be involved with the Coaches site. It was really I reached out to Aaron, not to plug a podcast on a podcast, but he's got the Glass and Out podcast where he has conversations with some of the best hockey coaches in the world, and had been a big fan of it. Again, from my media background, I had kind of contacted him with the angle of, has anybody ever interviewed you about the things that you've learned from the coaches that you've interviewed and how the podcast itself has changed you as a coach or somebody that runs a coaching platform like he does with the Coaches site? So they enjoyed the idea. We got in, had a conversation about that for his podcast. It went well. My favorite story to tell of that afterwards is there was black as night, storms, rain, thunder, everything out my window, and I was just praying to anybody that would listen just to keep my internet connected. my one chance to connect with Aaron and record this, and it worked. So we were good. And then he had asked if I had done any writing before. He had this idea of doing an in-depth look at some of the best hockey programs around the world and see how they operate day to day, what makes them different, what types of things they have in common, that type of theme. And so he'd offered me the opportunity to do that. And we've taken it and run with it. And it has just been, of everything I've been able to do with hockey and sports in general, truly one of the great blessings that I have, getting the chance to connect with just some incredible people you'd never run into any other way, and tell some stories about some incredible programs.
Yeah, amazing stuff. Yeah, he's got such a great platform there, and I enjoy the Glass and Out podcast as well. So no worries about promoting that, because we have a lot of hockey people that are listening, and that's probably one, if they're thinking about coaching or interested in the coaching of the sport. I think it's a great place and a great learning opportunity.
For sure.
So yeah. One of the things that's been getting debated for years, probably going back to even when I started playing, almost 40 years ago at this point, has been, what's the right model? How do we progressively, encourage and get players to develop over time? And I think to some degree, you've seen this shift in terms of the players and where they're coming from, even in the drafts alone, and then who ultimately ends up playing at a professional level. And you've had the opportunity to research many of the top programs in the world. Okanagan Hockey Academy, Shattuck St. Mary's. You did a piece on them, which my younger son goes to. John Godler, Frölunda, the Dallas Stars Elite, and probably many others. What do the programs that you've researched, what really separates them from, just your average local hockey program that's in your local community? Because I think that sometimes there's a lack of understanding there in some regards.
There is, for sure. It's a great point. And one of the interesting things about the articles that we've done, at this point, we've done 10 of them. And from what we're planning on doing with them, each one of them kind of takes on a life of its own. They have their own ideals. Maybe there's a theme that comes up that kind of centers around the article. But the other thing that's interesting, too, in the programs that we have looked at, there are some obvious similarities to it as well. 3 big words that we take from all of that when they're going through their programs and getting a chance to see how everything works: collaboration, alignment, communication. Best things about all 3 of those, and I say this to some of the programs that I've spoken with as well that aren't to the level of a Jokerit or a Frölunda, is all of those things are free. That's not just they've invested more money. They're the New York Yankees of this. They're putting all kinds of money into the program and this and that. They very well may be, and that's not the point of the article. The point of what we were able to find from that is their program from top to bottom. And I'm talking, if we use Jokerit in Finland as an example, they have a skating school that they introduce kids to skating at 3-4 years old. Their first team players can be anywhere from 20 to 35 years old, and everyone in between. The communication between the coaches, the alignment of the verbiage that they use with their players, how they set out that development model is run from top to bottom and bottom to top all the way through, and is a seamless transition. I think one of the things that we see a lot with youth hockey today is if there is a program that has a U10 team up into a U16 team, we'll say, they're operating almost as if they're 7 separate entities and different teams when we're not looking as one organizational umbrella. So the U11 coach is teaching a player how to break out a certain way. The U12 coach is talking about a certain type of forecheck or power play or whatever the case may be. but they're not aligned. The thinking is not aligned through the program. It's really the coach that's coming up with that particular plan or platform based on what they're comfortable teaching. And what we're trying to do, or what you see a lot, and I use European teams as an example much more than North America, just from the research that I've done, is in Europe, it seems like they're adding tools to the toolbox as they go. In North America, we're rushing this a lot faster than it needs to, in sense of teaching kids everything we know all the time. And I mean, if you tell me 15 things and you want me to remember all of them, statistically, if I remember 4 of them, I'm probably pretty good. Like that's,
Yeah.
that's a reasonable expectation. So, and that's where we get into, and you can break it down even further, right? It with the coaches, if they're not collaborative, if they're not sharing ideas, if we're not using the same language of, this is not necessarily a system, but this is what we call the F1. This is what we call when we're chasing the puck. If there's somebody on us and we've got our back turned, this is what we're using to let that player know that there's somebody on them. If we're not joined together and collaborating with how that verbiage is used, we're teaching kids any number of different things and hoping at the end of the day they're catching all of it. And ultimately, we're not giving these kids a lot of a chance to really develop. We're trying to race these kids through that system.
And I mean, do you think some of the problems or challenges that we're seeing, again, especially I think when you look at European model versus North American model, do you think some of that stems from the European side? It's more of a lifestyle. They're looking for kids who are looking to enjoy and progress in the sport, where here in North America, it's more of a business entity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that there's some correlation between those two as well?
Yeah, Larry, you're onto it 100%. Like that's really what I see as well with some of these programs. In Europe, there's no doubt about it. They have a longer runway or operate with a longer runway than we do in North America. So you're teaching a kid how to skate at 4 years old. These programs in Europe, and I'm just talking in general, not necessarily just for Europe as a whole. But
Sure.
you take Young Older Mannheim in Germany as an example. Hockey is the number 4 sport in Germany. We'll say if you were to rank in popularity, they need everyone to develop. They need all of these players to develop because their mandate at their first team, which is normally, again, like we said, 20 to 35-year-olds or so, is that 50% of their first team comes from their program. So they don't have to go and spend and bring in a bunch of guys just to fill roster spots. So when they're developing a player and ultimately you're hoping that they can be a first team player when they're 23 years old, you're almost given a 20-year runway to develop a player into what you're hoping they're going to be. In North America, what do? We are worried about winning at U12. We're worried about teaching power plays at U13. We're worried about, no, and again, it's a general statement, but
Right.
we
Sure.
may be a little more about banners and draft picks than we are developing a player as a whole. And you can see the numbers; they're out there as well. And I've done a little research on this too, just comparison with North America. And I talk about Ontario in this with the Ontario Hockey League draft. You will see a drastic drop off in enrollment from players if they are not drafted in the Ontario Hockey League. They may not know that there's other options like Junior A, like we have with Leamington, where we have a couple extra years and we're trying to help kids get into colleges. But there's a sense where if they don't get drafted in the OHL, they've worked so hard for 5-6 years. They're going to summer skates. They're going to this and that. We've got skills coaches. We've got skating coaches. We've got shooting coaches. We've got practices. All of this that's happening with these players. If they don't end up getting drafted, they don't make a certain team or whatever it is, they're tired. They're burned out. Some of them have lost interest in the game that they love so much just because that's all they've been doing for such a long period of time. So I think there's definitely, like you said, a big win in that, in looking at it from a development model that gives you a longer runway and you're able to add different parts or pieces to the puzzle as you go along, as opposed to trying to, winning does not necessarily mean development. Development's not necessarily winning. You can do both, but it's a slippery slope with some of the younger ages.
Yeah, I listen, that's been a huge challenge that we've seen through the years is that, winning mindset at too
Mhm.
early an age and not looking at your, whatever, your child who's playing the sport and kind of evaluating things from a standpoint of beginning, middle, and end of the season and
Right.
whether or not they've improved or developed.
Mhm.
Because, great, if you got all these wins in this championship, but your child didn't improve or develop over that period of time, really what was that year worth? It really
Right.
wasn't really worth all that much,
For
right?
sure, and I
you
mean,
know
you can look at ice time as the argument. I mean, you'll never find a kid that has said, "Okay, I got enough time on the ice today. I think they played me enough." Like it just doesn't exist, let alone a parent. But if you're on a winning team and you win a U16, but you're on the defined on the fourth line and you're playing 5 minutes a night, yes, you won, but did you actually develop, like you said?
right,
Um, and one of the comparisons that was made, and I saved that one for you, Larry, because I'm sure you'll get the idea behind it. But it's the idea of the stock market and the long term investment, where if you're putting money in right now, that may not be money that you need to pull out in 6, 7, 8, 9 years. You're going to let that grow, and you're going to pull out when the time comes. Here, it's a lot of money to play hockey. It's very
yeah,
expensive. It's time consuming. There's travel, there's hotels, there's equipment, there's enrollment fees, there's all that stuff that parents have to pay into. And I sympathize with that, and I worry about that one day because my little guy plays and it's not that expensive yet, but he's growing a little too fast for me and he wants to be a goalie. So
right,
I'm in trouble already. But there's a lot of money that gets put into it, and there's a lot of pressure on at the end of the year. If you can't check a few boxes, was that year worth it? What did you get out of that year? That type of thing. The easiest thing that people in general will go to is, we won. We went to the OHL Cup. We get a banner that we get to put up in the arena. We won. It was a great year. At U11, I will make the argument that it does not matter that you get to put a
right,
banner up at the end of the year. That's just me.
great,
For some of these programs and some of these younger coaches, and they get that in some of these more aligned organizations. If at U10, your only goal as a coach at U10 is that at U11, all the kids that played for your team play the next year. And that's the win. They
right,
enjoyed the year so much, they came back. You want to make these kids obsessed with playing hockey, and not at 13, 14 years old not wanting to go to the rink for whatever particular reason it is, because that's where you're going to lose the interest. And like they do in Europe compared to we do in North America, especially where I see it here, where we are in a hockey frenzy market, there is a very easy, and it's unfortunate, it's an easy move to on to the next kid, as opposed to the development of the kid that we already have.
right.
Not necessarily the grass is always greener with some of these kids. If you lose 4 kids, yeah, there's going to be 4 kids that are ready to jump in and take their spots, no question. But if you've been working with those kids that left for 2 or 3 years, it's a huge missed opportunity.
Yeah. So it sounds to me like there's a couple of really major differences. I know you said, you boiled everything down to those three items, but it also sounds to me like there's a difference in that outline development path
Mhm.
between Europe and North America. It seems like there's a different mentality and culture. And it sounds like part of that's because although you may be part of an organization, every age group is a little bit different because it takes on the culture of whoever that particular coach is. There's not that uniformity and structure that we're seeing in the on the European side of things.
Right.
And I think people would argue that, hey, North American players, especially like US, is getting more exposure at the professional
Mhm.
level. Maybe we're doing something right. But let me ask you this, is that giving us kind of a false indicator of what actually is going on? Are we missing out on a lot of talent because of that?
It's possible. I think there's a lot, and I've done a little bit of reading on it. I've got a few friends of mine that I've kind of networked with that kind of look at the relative age factor and things like that with kids. And at 15, 16, we're talking about these kids not necessarily being finished products, but that's when drafts start coming, right? You get drafted into the Western Hockey League at 15 years old. Your OHL drafts is when you're 16. So like
Well, don't they
we
say? I
have
mean,
this.
I've read things about the NHL draft, and I think that there's pretty good substantiation that it's one of the most unpredictable drafts out there because the kids are so incredibly young when they do it.
And that's just it. Like, I've had a conversation with an NHL head coach, or now former NHL head coach, asking them, when is like at your level, what age do you want these kids clicking on all cylinders, playing the absolute best hockey they've ever played in their life? His answer was 26. So if you're looking at a 15, 16-year-old that's being selected into a junior hockey program, and I'm not saying there's something wrong with the system, but at that age, I mean, you got a decade in between. That's almost half these kids' lives to develop good or bad habits or good or bad on and off the ice development. Like there's so much time in between, and that's why these drafts in any particular sport are so unpredictable. There's stories all the time, and we can always look back at drafts of 10 years ago. I can't believe this person got picked ahead of this person. I mean, you pick with the
Or
information.
undrafted coming in and killing it in the league, right?
You pick with the information that you have at the time, but you realize that you might not actually. Like Connor Bedard is a bit of a unicorn here. Like you're not going to make the jump from junior to the NHL all the time. There might be guys that are 6 or 7 years from doing that when it comes to draft time. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into it for sure. But I think we are certainly much more in a hurry in North America compared to where we are with Europe.
Yeah. So let's take a shift for a moment here. Many of the programs that you talk about, and many programs that talk about hockey, also talk about not only being a vehicle for hockey, but also a vehicle to create, good people.
Mm-hmm.
How do some of these programs, how do they attempt to do that? How is that part kind of solved by some of these top programs?
Yeah, that is something that is a regular theme as well. Again, you're hearing this from programs that are looking to not only have players that come out and maybe get drafted into the NHL or play pro hockey or whatever it is, right? But the acknowledgement that these kids are at some point going to be contributors to the communities that they live in. They're going to be full-time employees. I've read some numbers. One of the presentations that I did with the coaches site at their conference, 92% of the people that are in these programs are at some point going to have a full-time job. Maybe 50%, a little bit less than that, are going to be fathers at some point. They're all going to be contributors to their communities, good or bad. So the idea behind that is using hockey and sports as a vehicle to mirror life, and it does, right? You learn how to work as a team. You learn how to win and lose with grace. You learn how to take criticism. You learn how to deliver criticism. You learn how to handle pressure situations. And we're talking about you got 10 seconds left on the clock and a face-off in the offensive zone and trying to get a shot on net, right? There's a pressure situation between that and what we have to deal with as grown-ups. But you're building out some of those habits and you're teaching some of those reactions and those results with these kids that end of the day, it is not going to matter if they won or lost that particular game, but if they are able to recall some of the things that they've learned as an individual when they leave that program, the hope is that just like everybody else that's in their particular business or a particular sport, you're leaving that business or sport in a better position than it was when you first arrived. So that is a constant habit and a constant mindset that these programs emphasize and hurry up. They're hoping that these kids and Frolunda was the perfect example of it. The way that they explained it, at one point, these kids are going to be leaving their program. They're hoping that they're going to have kids that they had a great experience in the program and they want to put them back in the program. They may want to come back and volunteer their time as a coach. They may end up running a business and wanting to sponsor the program and putting money back into it that way, or time back into it that way. So they realize, and that's just not that program as an example, but they realize that there is a lot that you take out of the time that you're there and the very short time that you're at these programs that can last a lifetime.
Yeah, I agree. And it's great mindset. One of the things that I've spoken with a few former athletes on this very show about is, what happens when that playing comes to an end, right? Because that, as you alluded to earlier, right? Some of these kids are playing from a very young age. It's their identity. It's their life. What kind of tools can we provide players for that eventuality when their career, whether their career is going to come to an end at some point? I say all the time to my kids, all roads lead to men's league. It's just not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, right? So you'll end up there some way, someday. So what tools can we provide these young players with, that will help prepare them perhaps better? Because it seems like there's a problem there, even with professional athletes coming to an end at some point.
Oh, there is for sure. I think number one, they all need to pick up Financial Planning Made Personal by Larry Sprung.
Thank you for that plug. I appreciate it.
No, it's funny that you mentioned men's league. Zug in Switzerland was one of the programs that we featured, and Peter Forsberg and his family actually lived there. Is one of the people that, again, when I say I connected with Peter Forsberg and talked to him on the phone. Sometimes it's still hilarious to hear out loud, even though I saved the recording, just to prove that it actually happened. But he's playing men's league in Switzerland right now. So that's 2-time Stanley Cup champion, world champion, MVP. He's playing men's league. So we all end up there at some point for sure. No, I think there's a lot to it there. And I think that's where coaching has such an incredible impact and value of, not just teaching kids the game and teaching them the sport. And like we said, it's a platform to help develop kids for life in general. We don't give coaches enough credit, especially volunteer coaches at young ages that are getting up at crazy hours and driving back and forth and all of that stuff. The impact that they're having is incredible. And I think when we look at these programs, or I've had a chance to look at these programs, for me, this begins and ends with the coaches. If the coaches aren't on board with your development model from a hockey standpoint, then it just doesn't work. If you're not using the same language, if you're not coaching the same, using the same type of formula or systems or whatever it is, it just doesn't work. If you don't have a coach that truly, genuinely cares about the success of the player after they're gone from that particular age group, it just doesn't work. And that's a lot of pressure on coaches. There was a great line in the Notre Dame article that we had, and this was from the principal, Stéphane Gauvin. He's talking more of a teaching aspect, because it was interesting there, a lot of coaches and a lot of teachers, and you can tell the difference between them, or there's a lot of similarities between them, I should say. His line that really stuck out to me was, your one bad day or one bad line from turning a kid off of school or hockey forever. It's a dangerous and it's a very high pressure position that you're in. There's a lot to it. That's why, it's easy to say, oh, we should all coach like this and talk like this and everything's going to go well. But there's a lot of pressure on coaches to do that and be that positive role model. But if you're a coach and you can spend time with your players, you get a chance to get to know them as people. You can be one of their first role models of how to carry yourself in an adult life. There's a huge impact to that. And that to me is one of the things that when we talk about when players' careers are done, is giving back to the game. There's, whether it's financial advantages that they've had from playing hockey, or they've met people that they've met through building their network through the game, whatever they've returned from the game. I don't think anybody that's been involved in the game can really repay the game as much as they've taken from it. One of the ways of doing that is bringing that back and giving that back into their communities, into the younger age groups, getting involved in that aspect of things, because there's a lot that these players have seen and learned over time. That's not just things that you can teach a kid on the ice.
Yeah. Listen, I'll share a story that just happened with my son recently. My son recently traveled up to Calgary to practice with a junior team, and we were up there earlier this year. And there was a gentleman who was from the same school that my son was at, Shattuck St. Mary's, and he reached out to me, and we connected, and we had a conversation while we were up there. And he was like, half jokingly, "If your son's ever up here, let me know. I'd be happy to, help him out in any way I can. I'm a fellow alumni, et cetera." So when we knew he was taking this trip, I did send him a message. And long story short is he reached out to my son, and on two of the off days that my son had, he connected with him, took him out to breakfast one day, took him out to dinner another day. And they just had some great conversation about both their times at Shattuck, and, talks to that network and giving back and kind of being there for other players. And, it was a great relief for my wife and I, with my son traveling so far away, and to know that there was somebody on the other end of that trip where if we needed anything, we knew we could call him. And more importantly, he took the time out of his busy schedule. He's a businessman, works regularly, and he took time out of his day to spend time with our son. So, that's somebody to me who gets it, understands it, and is willing to give back to the game in the fashion that I think, you're kind of referencing and in what you just said.
Hockey and sports in general are just an amazing world, are they not?
Yes.
That's such a great story. And I've been so blessed to be involved with the coaches site and with our group in Leamington, and getting to meet the people that I've met and connect with all of them, yourself included, Larry. Like, again, we probably, you being in New York, and I'm in, as I said, Windsor, Ontario, we probably don't end up crossing paths at some point without hockey. And now we get to have this conversation. Hopefully it's something that there's some people listening that can take some information away from it and learn from it. And again, without the game that we both love, we wouldn't have had the chance to do this. So it's worth as much as you can give to it. We're all crazy hockey dads at some point. It's only some of us have a limiter on us that we're able to to control.
There's just a different level of crazy.
Exactly, we're all crazy. There's just a different level of it, but it's a great game to be involved with, and if anything else. Getting to connect with the people that I've had and hear some of the stories that they've had. It's a good feeling to know that there are a lot of people out there that, again, want to leave hockey in a better place than it was when they first got in.
Yeah. So, Matt, you've spoken with some incredible people, from the U13 coach at Yokerit to Father Henry at Shattuck, to Peter Forsberg, who you mentioned earlier, and Rod Brindamore, the head coach of the Canes. What are some of the biggest takeaways that you've had personally from some of those really great conversations with, arguably some of the best that are associated with the game?
Yeah, I think one of the great parts of getting to do this is meeting some of the people that don't get the headlines, right? Like you mentioned Rod Brindamore, you mentioned Peter Forsberg. I've spoken with Yari Curry at Yokerit, and just some of the biggest names this game has ever seen. And then you mentioned Father Henry, and Father Henry is one that, of all the interviews that I've done, still stands out to me. After I ended up having that conversation with him, I remember talking to my girlfriend, Christine, about it after at dinner. And I was getting emotional talking about what an incredible person he was over the 45-minute conversation that we had. Right. You get to connect with so many different people and just see how they're carrying themselves and what they're giving and where their motivation is. It's funny, in some of the articles that I've written, I've had to specifically ask the coaches or the front office people that I've talked to about when winning comes into the picture, because nobody talks about it. They're talking about developing, like we said, developing the person, giving kids the opportunities, letting them see different aspects of the game, all of those different types of things. And then we have a conversation about, so like, when it matters to Frölunda that they win. These are some of the most competitive people you've ever met in your life, but I have to specifically ask them when winning matters. And they all kind of laugh and they say, oh, what we're doing at the beginning is what leads to winning, to winning hockey. So there's an aspect to that as well that you can take from everything else. It's a one day at a time, being that 1% better, all the cliches that you can kind of think of. But the one great thing about the people that I've had a chance to connect to is they all are extremely open with sharing ideas. This is how they operate. They're taking emails and phone calls from somebody who they've never heard of that wants to do an in-depth look into why their program is as good as it is. And they're open books because, again, there's no secret sauce to it. If anything that I've learned, and we've talked about from an organizational level, there's no secret sauce to what these programs are doing. They just do a lot of things really well, and that comes with being a collaborative whole group. So if anything, the takeaway from that is anyone can do this. It really takes a lot of work. It takes a big group of people pushing in the same direction. But it can be done anywhere. And that's not to discount what some of these programs do. That's simply to emphasize that what they have operating and a day-to-day workshop from them is simply something that can be taken and can be not necessarily replicated, but done in different areas of the world, in anybody's backyard, if you have the right people with the same mindset.
Great stuff. Yeah, I agree. And I look forward to the day where we see more of these types of programs popping up, even in, here in the States in local communities. So, kids who want to, challenge themselves don't have to find themselves going thousands of miles away from home in order to do that. I think it can be done if done correctly and with the right intentions in, almost every local market. And I think probably the same stands true for Canada as well. So
Yeah.
I look forward to that day. But Matt, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. We end each of our shows by asking each of our guests the same final question. We're the Midland Money Mindset. We're all about joy here. And that is, what did you do today that brought you joy and put you in the right mindset for success?
Well, I mean, at the time that we record this, one of my favorite parts of the day in the morning, I get to put my kids on the bus. I give them, maybe get about 10, 15 minutes of time with them at the bus stop and just try to goof around with them and make them laugh a couple times and hopefully get their day going as well. And then I get to come to work, and luckily we're able to work from home, and my girlfriend works downstairs, and every time I open the door, I get to see her beautiful face, and that puts me in a great spot as well. Her daughter will be home soon as well, so that'll make me more excited and busier, and it's great. It's when you get to celebrate little things like that every day, it's impossible to have a bad day.
Nice. That's great stuff right there. So listen, we are recording this in full disclosure right at the beginning of the NHL playoffs, and this probably won't go live until the Stanley Cup champion has been crowned.
Yeah.
So let's put you on the spot here for a minute, and we can see if you're right or wrong going backwards when this airs.
Sure.
Who do you got for the 2023-24 Stanley Cup champion?
Yeah, I caveat with this of when I get this wrong, that doesn't discount everything else we've talked about.
I think I know where this might be going, but go ahead.
No, you're going to be. I got a feeling of where you're thinking too. But I'm from Windsor, so I mean, growing up, I could see Tiger Stadium and Joe Louis Arena from my front lawn. I am a Red Wings fan and a Tigers fan and state of Michigan type guy. And I'm not just saying this because we're on the podcast with you, Larry, but from the very beginning, I really like what the New York Rangers have.
Oh, wow.
I like that. I like that team a lot. Their odds were pretty good that they're not a real outstanding favorite. I'll never pick the first seed anywhere. I think that's a cop out. But
Okay.
I'll take the New York Rangers and the Dallas Stars in the Stanley Cup.
Oh, wow. All right. Let's see if that happens. I think for that to come to fruition, for even the opportunity, the thing that the Rangers have to do differently this year than they did last year and even the year before is they got to win a couple of these series in the short term. They got,
Yes.
4 or 5 games.
Yeah.
They can't go 7-7-7 and expect the bodies to hold up for that period of time. So
No kidding.
we'll see. I hope that's the case. It'll be a very interesting season. So I'll take your word for it there.
Sounds good.
And we'll see if you're right when this airs. But listen, if people want to learn more about your series, the Hockey Factories, or what you're doing with the coach's site, what's the easiest and the best place for them to do that? Keep in mind, we'll have all of your information in the show notes for people to find that, but what's the easiest and best ways for them to learn more about those things?
Yeah. So thecoachesite.com is the website. It is truly the most comprehensive coaching site that you're going to find for hockey and maybe really any sport in general. There's all kinds of information on there. And it's very worth joining on and being a member and just reading through some of the articles and real in-depth stuff that the website does. I'm on Twitter and Instagram. I don't post a ton on Instagram other than pictures of my goofy kids sometimes, but other than that, the Twitter is probably the easiest way to get me, or by email as well. And I can give you that one too from the Coach's Site website to put in the notes. So it's right. Again, I love having these conversations. I'm thrilled to have been on here and get a chance to connect with you there, Larry. So anybody that wants to reach out, that wants to talk about their program and ways that they can become a Frölunda 2.0. I'd love to help anywhere I can. And again, I think my goal coming in, there's always been a bit of an idea for me. I never played hockey growing up. Got involved in the game late. I go out with my kid when he skates at U7, and I can promise you I'm the worst skater on the ice, including the kids. But I'm thrilled to be involved with the game as much as I can be, and just trying to put the game in a better spot than when I got into it.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Matt. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your knowledge and sharing your stories. And I look forward to continuing to hear them. Thanks, and enjoy your day.
Thanks. You too, Larry.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Midland Money Mindset. Remember, it's not just about the money. It's finding joy in the journey and embracing the right mindset. If you love the show, be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Don't forget to follow along for more tips and inspiration. Please visit the social links below to connect with Larry or his guests. Until next time, keep smiling, keep thriving, and remember to think about, what did you do today that brought you joy?